Etapu, assalamu alaikum, namaste, haru nefer. This is Kasakma Keparu with another video for you. In this video, we're going to talk about the Kemitic deities and their complements. But before I get into that, I want to, what do I want you to do before I get into that? Hit that like button. Hit the like button located below. If this is your first time to my channel. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live and when I upload recorded videos. And if you're interested in taking your knowledge of the esoteric to the next level, please click on any one of the links below. We have free ebooks for you. You can download those ebooks and start reading today. And if you're interested in following that rabbit down the rabbit hole and you want to get out the matrix, support us on Patreon. You can do so for as little as $1, $5, $20 per month. It's up to you. You can cancel it anytime. You get exclusive access to instructional videos on the esoteric. The videos will teach you how to meditate, how to summon spirits, how to work with the oracles, become a diviner, how to self-hypnotize yourself, and so much more. So become a Patreon supporter today. Thank you, Haru Nefer. How are you doing? So today I want to do something very interesting. I covered this in my class on reality manifestation. So if you get an opportunity, sign up for our reality manifestation course. It is awesome. You learn a lot of good stuff, and it's at a reasonable price. So check it out. Link is below there. It's interesting because I was kind of thinking about, and when you think you accessing Sebek or Anubis, left brain, you think because you don't know. Knowing is Tahuti. So I was thinking about our reality, the 4D reality that we exist in. And I was realizing that, we tend to operate in what NLP calls a closed loop, meaning that you have committed to something, it's said and done, and that's all there is. And I'll give you an example of that. You may look at a white person and say that person is white. Regardless of anything else, he's labeled as white or she's labeled as black. But we don't look at relational thinking, or we don't look at relational thinking, but we don't think in terms of relational thinking. Meaning that in order for that person to be black, there has to be that complement or that context. You have black, you have white to define it, and vice versa. So we've got to start looking at in terms of relationship, or as Ma'at would say, relational thinking. That is absent from the Western mode of thinking, because the Western mode of thinking is what I said before, is closed loop. It's just concrete, and it's definite, it's defined, and that's all there is. But it doesn't account for in life when you need to think relationally, when something is only defined by its complement. And I was going through the Meditative Volume 1. I highly recommend that you get this. And it really kind of summed it up for me. And it was brilliant. So let me read that paragraph for you. It is on page 203. And it says, all items of information are no more than labels, definition, and descriptions, that is, symbols of objective realities, and not the realities themselves. While they are 100% trustworthy for thinking about closed systems with non-variable components, meaning making or fixing machines, electronic appliances, houses, they have a delusionary effect on thinking in situations in which the value of the components are subject to change as the relationship between them changes. As a result, the verbal and graphic symbols, which are the foundation of our thought activities, because of their inherent finite nature, cannot cover all aspects of realities and eventualities. These relational events are none other than the issues of living itself, economics, spiritually, sciences, philosophy, psychology, sociology. For example, what or who is man? Is he a rational animal? Did he ascend from the apes or descend from God? So that really encapsulates what I'm trying to get across, meaning that our way of thinking does not encompass relational thinking when the time comes and when we need to. So we're so fixed in just this concrete way and this finite way of looking at things. And I think what the author Rauteneffer said was very profound, in the sense that, hey, this means that you are limiting, in a way, your perception of reality. Your perception of reality is skewed in that sense, because you're looking at something in a very finite way when it calls for relational thinking. And that's important when you are trying to manifest a new reality, when you're trying to exercise your power as God man, God woman. And we know that Tudy tells us nothing has a quality in and of itself, and we must understand that and work with that. But this is no fault of our own, because we have been brought up in the Western world where their whole modus operandi has been left brain, linear time-space thinking. This is why many of these so-called scientists have not really achieved any level of intelligence, I would say, because they have, although postulated secrets and answers to the universe, they have created problems, because now they go back and they realize, well, when you say the Big Bang, how can there be something from nothing? And if we're looking at the Big Bang occurring within linear time space, beginning, middle, and end, what was there before the Big Bang? So they come up with these theories and then have to go back and rewrite them, because they realize that their linear thought process, their left brain thinking, has created a problem for them. Just like in time travel, there's something called the grandfather paradox. And that's an issue that they have to try and resolve. If you go back and kill your grandfather, you won't be born, so you wouldn't have gone back in the first place. So it's a paradox. And that's what the left brain does perfectly. It tries to solve a problem, but then creates another problem in its wake, because it doesn't have the capacity to think holistically. And this is how we look at the Kemitic deities. You see, we learn to view them from the Greek way of thinking, because we're taught that, left brain thinking. So we look at the deities, we look at Set, Ma'at, and we see them as finite, concrete. We don't know that there's a special relationship between the deities, and that relationship is important. And without their complements, then they cannot exist, because they're halves of a whole. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about those complements, or those special relationship between the deities. We are going to be using the Kemitic tree of life, the pantheon of the gods. And the Kemitic tree of life is so brilliant in how it was devised. And it went through a series of changes over the course of years in Kemet, or throughout each dynasty, I should say, because they were perfecting it. And we must understand that these deities were not just gods that we saw and venerated, but they stood in place for universal principles, intelligences that govern the universe. And that they were so sophisticated in how they were constructed, created as anthropomorphized figures, that when Western man in his concrete thinking looked at that, couldn't really understand what he was seeing. He just thought he was seeing an ibis bird for Tahuti, and that we worship birds. He didn't understand that that was merely a symbol, and that the Egyptians were masters of puns, and that we thought in a way of analogies, relational thinking. So we knew that there was no real ibis bird as a god, or there was no real crocodile as a god, but that was used to describe a set of attributes. And it went even deeper than that. It described a set of universal principles that governed our lives. But again, Western mind thinking concrete, they couldn't conceptualize that. They didn't understand it. So they called it primitive. And then that was the basis of creating race, which is a fabrication, and for racism. We're looking at a group of people and saying they're primitive. They're not as advanced as we are. They have no morals. When we created the concept of Goddess Ma'at, by observing the universe and observing nature, we knew that there was an order to everything, and we said that was governed by this female deity. And understand and by we have to start saying there is relationship is complement. Now, this is something I've gone into with my program, as I said before, reality manifestation, but I wanted to bring this to the general public because I see that a lot of people, when they talk about the deities, they talk about the gods, they don't really get the understanding of how these gods are interrelated and interdependent between one another. So they have to look at that, but they fail to do that because we've been taught an erroneous way of thinking. It hampers us. It confines our thinking to a box, and we can't break out of that. And it also creates a reality that limits us. And we need to break free of that. See, I've talked about this many, many times. Those people who are practicing what they call the Kemitic religion, I say, you must understand that you're dealing with how the brain works, the two hemispheres of the brain, which our ancestors knew about, the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. One thinks abstractly, the other thing, one thinks in terms of concrete. The goal is to have them work together and have integrated brain thinking. When you're thinking out of the left brain only, you'll come up with something like the Hegelian dialectic. You have your thesis and your antithesis, and then you sit there and postulate that one opposes the other. So you've created an enemy where there was no enemy. You didn't understand complementary elements, that they're just halves of a whole. They complement one another. And when we take a deep dive and look at the tree of life, we understand that it not only speaks about the deities, but each deity governs a thinking process. And that thinking process is either segregative, congregative, analytical, synthesizing, and abstract, concrete. And that's important. Because if any one of those faculties are not operating correctly, then we have a skewed perspective on life. This is what the modern education system fails to teach. It fails to talk about how there are different processes and how you absorb information. The problem that we have today and what's causing the problems in the world is that we're processing information through this segregated faculty. So we're always looking to separate, label, define. And that creates friction. That creates wars. That creates opposition. We don't know how to think in terms of harmonious thinking. Like, how do we bring these things together congregatively so they can work together in a harmonious fashion? We never think about that. It's always creating the enemy where there is no enemy. This is why the Chinese came up with homeopathic thinking or homeopathic medicine, so that you won't create a medicine and in the wake of creating that, create really bad side effects that could kill you. Because everything is, and also we have to look at the indirect relationships. Just because you have a pain in your arm doesn't mean that it originates in the arm. It could be coming from somewhere else. But in our science, we look at just attacking the symptom and putting a Band-Aid on it, not realizing that it can be caused by many different things. So let's get into this complement, and we're going to work through some of the deities so we get a good understanding of them and their complements. Now, everyone should be familiar with the deity of Oseir, the great uniter of the way, the great uniter of Upper and Lower Egypt, and left and right hemispheres of the brain, integrated brain thinking. Now, we call this the Metu. Hidden within this Oseir reading is an Aset reading, his complement. One must have devotion, which is what she stands for. She also stands for trance. One must have devotion to bringing about the resurrection of the God within you, Oseir. So what is Oseir without Aset? They're husband and wife, brother and sister. Keep that in mind. A special relationship between Aset and her son, Heru. The ability to go into trance, meditation, will empower your will. And Heru is the king. Heru is circumspection. There's a special trinity, the holy trinity, between Oseir, Aset, and Heru. That is the first holy trinity. There's a special relationship between Heru and Herukahuti. Heru becomes Herukahuti when he battles with Set. Moving on, there's a special relationship between the goddess Ma'at and her mate, Tahuti. Ma'at is the law, Tahuti's wisdom in knowing how to apply the law. They complement each other. Tahuti's the scribe, he's wisdom. Ma'at is truth, justice, righteousness, and balance. There's a special relationship between Tahuti and Sebek. Sebek is information, the acquiring of information through the left brain. Tahuti is wisdom, knowing, accessing the Akashic records, God's wisdom through the oracles, through the sages. We're trapped in a world that is governed by Sebek, left brain thinking, concrete thinking. Tahuti is more on the lines of relational wisdom. Tahuti says nothing has a quality in and of itself. Our belief systems define and label things. There is a special relationship between the goddess Sekert and Heru. Sekert dies to things of the world. She doesn't care about beauty, joy, how things may be pleasant. She's very, very introverted, and she looks to study the secrets of the universe. This is why she governs magic, God's spiritual power. The opposite of that, or the complement, is Heru. She wants things to be joyful, pleasant, pretty. She has to feel good about it. She loves to socialize. Again, Sekert loves to be introverted. They complement each other. There's a relationship between these two, which is subliminal seduction, between Wajet and Nekabet, the head of the serpent and the tail. Wajet is the offensive power, and Nekabet is the defensive power. They both relate to subliminal influences, psychic communication. Next, there's a special relationship between Sheps, our ancestors, and the dark deceased being. our honored ancestors who have passed on and are worthy of the title of ancestor. Dark deceased beings are beings who have passed on but not have transcended. They have not learned their lessons in life. So they may wander the duat. There's a special relationship between Geb and Amen. Geb is the physical. Geb deals with the manifestation of all physical objects, including the physical body, the health of the body, where Amen is God's original state, the hidden, that which cannot be perceived, felt, heard, tasted. God is no thing, no one thing. This is why on the Kemitic tree of life, Geb is below and Amen is on top. And then all the other deities are in between. So those are the complementary relationships and the hidden metu within each of the deities. So you must start to think in that way, that when you think about Oser, you must say to yourself, well, we cannot have Oser, we cannot have God on earth, which is what Oser is, without the devotion to becoming God, Aset. Without the ability to go into trance and empower our will, Haru. So this formula, in deciphering it, will help you to better understand the deities. It will help you better think in terms of relational things and to get out of that fixed, finite way of thinking when you're looking at the deities. And this is why our ancestors came up with the story of Asar and Aset, so that you would look at this story, you would read about this story, and then cover the relationship between those deities and how important they were. You see, this is the foundation of our entire culture. Integrated brain thinking. We never thought in terms of this segregative, concrete thought faculty, because we knew it would be problematic in life if we began to trap ourselves in left brain thinking alone. When you see individuals like Elon Musk comes along and he cannot understand how the Egyptians built the pyramids, so he must attribute it to aliens. He doesn't understand that we are trapped in left brain thinking and that our ancestors transcended that and they thought through both hemispheres of the brain. And that is how they were to produce wonders of this world. This is how they were able to produce geniuses like Imhotep or many, many other geniuses in Kemet. This is how they were able to travel through the stars, because they weren't limited in their thinking. They understood. This is why their language was composed of 3 writing styles and not just one. Because they knew, depending upon what you were trying to accomplish in your writings, you would have to adapt and move to a specific type of writing style. So keep that in mind. I want you to understand that the troubles that we're going through in this world and the problems that you may be going through personally are caused by a set of thinking, a set of belief systems. And you must learn to adapt a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at life that encompasses complementary elements, and stop setting yourself up for this grand battle by creating an enemy where there is no enemy. Is there any wonder why the world in such a terrible state it is today? Because of the mindset. This is why I say you're not going to be able to defeat racism by cute slogans like Black Lives Matter. You've got to transition the world from one mode of thinking to another. And when you do so, there will be no opportunity for racism to come forth, for sexism to come forth, because people's thinking will not allow for that. When you start understanding that all things are one, because you're thinking through the right brain, you're in 5D, then there's no opportunity for you to say, oh, that's my enemy. Oh, that person's against me. That's not part of that mode of thinking. But when you're trapped in left brain, you'll say, yeah, that person is my enemy and that person is evil. There you go. You just label and define something. And that causes the problems in the world. So I want to thank you for tuning into this broadcast. And if you're interested, sign up for my reality manifestation program. We go deeper into these elements of the deities and how they complement each other, the Metu, and also how to manipulate and transform reality to align with your wishes. So this is Kasagma Keparu, son of Ma'at Tahuti. My aunt is a beautiful goddess Sedaru. Until my next broadcast, Amen Ra.